I have quite a lot of clients who are on the awakening path and the deep path of transformation. And what seems to come up, there are always many nuances, but in a way there's only one real path, and that's why I speak so much about finding ways, not methods, but ways of embracing the past and beyond that, the whole human condition. Everybody's had wounds, everybody's had issues, some to a greater or lesser extent, but at some point on the spiritual path, or even in a way just on the human path in life, those issues, they have to be released from the constant torment, the constant replaying, the constant unresolvedness of them, that goes on in us. And I know from working with a lot of people, in the teaching capacity, that there is for many, really a kind of secret, quiet, and maybe not so secret and not so quiet, kind of hope or imagination or desire or wish that awakening, which I say again is not really something that I'm interested in talking about particularly, except kind of vicariously or somehow obliquely, but not as a thing. That's what I can't talk about awakening as a thing. So I don't. So but there is this secret kind of longing or hoping that awakening, whatever it may be to the mind, is somehow going to bring to an end, resolve, render inert, completely kind of wipe out or dissolve or heal all issues of the past, and kind of bring us to such a state of peace, that we almost don't really have to deal with it anymore. We don't have to deal with the past anymore. And although there's a kind of sort of truth in that, what really seems to happen is that people have awakening experiences, see the light, get a flash of it, experience a kind of unity, in some way subtle or profound, and it endures and it stays, and it does open up the mind, the heart, the whole of the kind of beingness to a new level of seeing, or a new level of consciousness, or a deeper level of consciousness. And this is beautiful, and this is really good, but then by and by, that which is unresolved on the almost psychological, probably energetic, I think is a better way to talk about it, on the energetic level, kind of rises up to, well, we imagine, to destroy our awakening, or to torment us in some kind of way, but to these eyes and the way that we work is actually those things, those energies, those unresolved energies are coming up because they want the light as well. They want to come home, yeah? They want the peace. They want the union. They want the love. And to have a sense of it, because you expand a little bit or open a little bit. And something, in that openness, well, so, it's like if we keep it down, if we keep stuff down, yeah, it takes force and it takes a kind of steeliness to keep things down. It just does, yeah? It's an energetic kind of lid that we keep on things unconsciously, usually, and and rightfully in some kind of ways, because we're so hooked into kind of the survival of the self, the survival of me, that has learned these strategies of survival. And part of that survival, psychological survival, energetic survival, is to keep the lid on, the trapdoor on the bad stuff, the ugly stuff, the dark stuff, the unwanted stuff, the very painful stuff, the rageful stuff, the grief stuff, all of this kind of, and it's endless. You know it. I'm kind of speaking to the converted in some ways, but it's good to just juice it up a little bit. So, so what happens is that we open a little bit, a twinkle, a view of the light, a sense of openness, like I said. And so something opens. Well, the trap door opens. The steely door that we keep on everything opens. Yeah? And if there's nothing in there, then there's nothing to open and nothing to close. Yeah? This is a metaphor. I hope you understand. It's a metaphor, and it'll probably fall apart in some way, shape or form. But, words to describe these things are always kind of clumsy, but this is kind of interesting. So the door opens, the steely door opens because there's been a relaxation maybe, or an opening. Well then, of course, it's the things are going to start coming up, aren't they? It's like they are really, in a way, coming up from the energy body, from the subtle energy body. I've talked about this a lot, about how things are stuck in a way in the mind, emotion, body armoring system. So when we open up a little bit, maybe open the heart, or maybe open the mind, or some part of us kind of energetically open, everything that's down below, everything that's below the surface starts to say, oh, me too. I'm heading for the trap door. I'm heading for the light. I want the light as well, because everything wants to come home. Everything wants to come home. Yeah, and this is, this is the invitation. And if the awakening wants to be embodied in you, then this is, it's part of the journey. You can't avoid it. It's not going to kill. Keeping the lid on is what kills us, because it kills our life force, and it kills our union, and it kills our energetic freedom, and it kills some part of our authority, because we have to, strategize and kind of, manipulate ourselves, and the outside world, of course, in order to keep the lid on things. And these things are things that actually want to bust out all over the place, not because they're destructive, although they can feel destructive, but because they want to come home, because they're begging us for attention. We just don't know that, yeah? And at a certain point, something starts to happen. Maybe you're just completely tired of fighting yourself. I know I was. Sick of it. I was utterly sick of it. Sick of fighting myself. Sick of trying to keep everything at bay. Sick of addiction. Sick of dysfunction. Sick of the mess that I found myself in all the time. I mean, this was quite dramatic in my 40s. And in that sort of, being utterly sick of myself, I was like, it's easier, it's better to face the pain of, opening the doors, and deal with what I actually feel, what I actually felt. And that was a journey, of course. And it started this long journey through illness, through emotional catharsis, through everything, and by, over a long period of time, there's no door, there's no nothing, there's no trap door in there, there's no pushing things down or letting things up. It's like it becomes a very harmonious kind of movement. And that did take time, and it did take guts. And I keep saying this, I know I'm very boring, but it does take time, and it does take a great willingness, but we all have that capacity. And the thing is that, what we need to go back to what I said at the beginning, is like I learned that actually, in many ways, my life isn't my own. In many ways, I started to see that my life like everybody's lives, are these kind of archetypal, Jungian, almost, oh God, what's his name? I've completely forgotten the author. Joseph Campbell, a kind of Joseph Campbell-like archetypal story of coming into being. And then the passage of time through the growth, through the movement of the human. And I started to see certain kind of a sort of pattern in myself. I saw that I was born innocent. I was born into innocence in my own life, as I think we are, at least most of us. And then there was a fall. My fall came at 10, 11 years old, when my entire world started to fall apart in my family. A slow train wreck, I would say, that lasted for 5 years. And it was very destructive, this kind of simmering earthquake, simmering volcano. So that was a kind of, the fall from grace, or the jettisoned from the garden of innocence, the Garden of Eden in a way. I'm not religious, but there was the Garden of Eden. And then, from the ages of like 18, 19, cast out into the wilderness, lost. Like, lost, utterly lost into myself and floundering around. And that's when, the dysfunction happened. And that's when we play out the kind of wandering in the wilderness. For me, it was dysfunction, dysfunctional relationships, addiction, hedonism, just very destructive, self-destructive, not so much destructive to other people, but, they were collateral damage to the destruction, that I was really waging on myself, which I think we do in many ways. Certainly some people turn it outwards, and most turn it inwards, and then to continue the archetypal story, kind of myth sort of my life. And then about 40, 45 years old, everything stopped. The escape tactics and the addiction stopped working, and there was a glimmer of light. And I started to feel things, and I started to almost to wake up a little bit. And I was in a chronic condition, and I was given ultimatums. If you do this, you're going to die, and if you carry on doing this, you're going to, I'm going to leave you. That was one of them. These kind of great insights. So something happened, and I started to listen. And then there was the journey, the next phase, I would say, of the journey, which is finding something, struggling, releasing, cathartic, looking for the light, looking desperately in the forest. I've talked about this before, in the forest of shadows. Actually going through the wilderness, not through the wilderness, through the forest, trying to find my way home, to something that I didn't even know what it was. As it was searching for the innocence that I lost in the world, as we lose our innocence in the world, and we think it's gone forever. But for some reason, I was touched enough to kind of start trying to find it again, not consciously. Don't get the idea that I was doing any of this consciously. I was doing this instinctively. It's only looking back that I can say that this is what was happening. I couldn't see it at the time. I was desperately trying to survive, psychologically and physically as well, with the illness that I had. And so then by and by, things started to get cleansed, and things started to get healed. Things started to get almost sewn together again somehow. And then as I reached like 60 years old, this is, so 20 years it all lasted for. Then by the time I got to kind of 60 years old, a certain maturity started to happen where I was no longer all these disassociated, separate bits, but actually I started to come back to one unified whole. Was that spiritual, or was that just the kind of human journey? Because I end up feeling, that we spiritualize something that is actually the deeply, almost mystical, archetypal human journey that we're on. And it's a profound, oh, my dog's going to bark any second because he hears the mailman. That's his journey. Oh, no, we're going to be all right. This profound human journey that we're on. And now I'm 65. I don't mind telling you I'm 65. And there's a certain natural, holistic, non-dual sort of, dare I say, wisdom, naturalness in this experience. And so that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to point to, is that's when I stopped being the victim of life. Yeah, that everything that ever happened to me has conspired to bring me to this point. And here I am, and here we are in presence. The presence just of this moment as it is. Yeah, and if you begin to love this moment just because you're rooted in the presence of beingness, with no story, with nothing, just this. Yeah, no philosophical thing, no struggle, no trying. You're just here in thisness. Then everything that ever happened to you, even though it hurt, and even though it was wrong, and even though it was bad, and even though etc., 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 it still conspired to bring you to this place, and therefore it had to happen. And therefore it was perfect. And I don't say that lightly, but it was perfect because it brought you here. And here is where you need to be. And here is where you are. So that's a long story about the human journey that we may call the spiritual path. But in many ways, I just prefer to call it the human experience. Thanks. See you soon.